I want the cast and crew on the ship within the hour.
No, Carl, you can't do this.
Tell them the studio pressured us into an early departure.
It's not ethical.
What are they gonna do, sue me? Huh? They can get in line. I'm not gonna let them kill my film.
Reboots, remakes, and reimaginings. 3 words that would strike fear into the heart of any cinephile. But you know what? It wasn't always that way. There was a time when these things brought excitement and intrigue. Films that had been forgotten in time were revived and ushered forth to a new audience with brand new ideas, twists, and themes. And because remakes tended to be successful, bringing back old fans and making new ones, they became pretty popular. Studios rushed to reinvigorate old IPs, leaving no stone unturned, and giving us, for better or worse, a whole slew of new movies. Unfortunately, the quality of these remakes varied. They were hit or miss. Most churned out for some quick cash, while others dared to be great, and some even surpassed the original. So when I say great remakes, what comes to mind? Usually you'd hear movies like The Thing, Scarface, and The Departed, and all are top-tier remakes, and they stand alone as truly amazing films. But there is another film that I feel deserves some recognition, one that often flies under the radar and doesn't get the respect it rightfully deserves. Rewind to the 1990s, where Universal Studios had a desire to work with director Peter Jackson, and that ended up manifesting itself as a remake of the legendary 1933 film King Kong. After originally being hesitant with the opportunity, Jackson said he, quote, quickly became disturbed by the fact that someone else would take it over and make it into a terrible film. That haunted me, and eventually I said yes to Universal, end quote. A script had been written and the project was moving forward. But, cue some behind the scenes drama, some studio heads getting nervous, and the film was shelved. With the upcoming Godzilla film from TriStar and a gorilla-centric project from Disney, Mighty Joe Young, Universal pulled the plug, despite there being a finished script and concept art having been completed. But Jackson went on to film and complete the Lord of the Rings trilogy with Warner Brothers, which became a cultural phenomenon, and basically made Jackson one of the hottest directors at the time. So of course, Universal went back to Jackson, picking up right where they left off, and the King Kong project was revived. But this time, Jackson brought with him some of the talented and experienced crew members who worked with him on the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The script was reworked and rewritten, and production began again. And in December 2005, Peter Jackson's King Kong was released into theaters.
We have 3 hours to find a new leading lady, or we're finished. There are thousands of actresses out of work in this city. Somewhere out there is a woman born to play this role. A woman who will journey into the heart of the unknown.
The movie went on to become, at the time, the most expensive movie ever made. Its budget bloated to over $200 million. But it made $556 million worldwide at the box office and sold over $100 million worth of DVDs. We often forget just how important physical media sales were back then. A lot of movies could lag at the box office but recoup a lot of their budget after they had left theaters. The film was a major success both commercially and critically. The film has an 84% on Rotten Tomatoes with an average rating of 7.7 out of 10. The movie, its cast and crew, went on to pick up several awards, including 3 Oscars. So, does the movie hold up? Could it be the greatest remake of all time? Well, let's break it down.
I've come into possession of a map. An uncharted island. A place that was thought to exist only in myth. Wall! There's a wall ahead!
I'm sure you know the story already. It takes place in 1933 during the Great Depression. There's a filmmaker, Carl Denham. Him, his cast and crew depart on a ship heading for a mysterious island where, well, you know the rest.
Scream for your life!
Herb, get the camera.
The story of King Kong is iconic. It's an incredible idea that was limited to the technology of the time when the original came out. And I'm not knocking it because the way in which the original was made was truly outstanding and was brilliant for its time. But it's been nearly 100 years since that film came out, and of course it's going to feel a little dated. But what Jackson does is he takes the original story and makes it better in almost every way. He expands the lore in a way that makes you think it was his original idea. Every character is fleshed out. Each scene is written with purpose and importance. The world building and mythos is carefully crafted and engaging, and you can feel that with the heavy runtime. It's nearly 3 hours, and the definitive edition is nearly 3.5. But the pacing is great, and it really doesn't feel like such a long movie. It doesn't drag. The pace stays pretty consistent throughout the entire movie, which is pretty hard to do because he balances these fast-paced action sequences as well as these slow and soft romantic or dramatic scenes. And you've got to give it to the casting director, because part of what makes the characters so great is how they're portrayed. And who would have thought one of Jack Black's greatest performances, at least in my opinion, would be in the character as despicable as Carl Denham. I mean, he is perfect. The character is based on Orson Welles, and Black's work here is actually really good. He's a horrible person, yet Black does bring some charisma and a charm that makes it believable and that people would work with him or would trust him. And Naomi Watts is of course great as Anne Darrow. Her screams are fantastic, which is definitely a necessity in a role like this where those screams are going to be spread out throughout the movie and they need to be impactful. She goes from a quirky vaudeville actress to a hardened survivor by the end of the film. But it isn't just the leads that are so good. The entire supporting cast is great. Each character is so important and likable, from Preston to Captain Englehorn and Bruce Baxter. All of the actors are giving great performances here, and they're believable too. The dynamic between Jimmy and Hayes was done perfectly, and I really did feel for Jimmy during that log scene. Jackson is able to balance a lot of character arcs here. They're all handled with delicate and careful hands. Anne, for example, starts off as desperate. She's a struggling actress during the Great Depression seeking work. But ultimately, in the end, she refuses life-changing money to star in Denham's show. Her time on the island has changed her, and she's not the same quirky and innocent girl she was at the beginning. Bruce Baxter, who's a total narcissistic coward, goes through a transformation and becomes the action character that he plays in the movies. Even Carl Denham, he's a greedy pariah, and he finally does become self-aware at the end of the movie. The only character and actor that I would say was on the weaker end was Adrien Brody as Jack Driscoll. And I don't think that he was really that bad or miscast like I've heard some say. I think the monotone, dreary writer was the way that Jackson and Brody probably wanted to take it. I just found it odd that there wasn't more energy from him in some of the scenes, especially after battling with the dinosaurs or facing off against Kong. You'd think he'd have a bit more adrenaline rushing through his veins, and I feel like he was the only character who didn't change too much. Like, from the get-go, he's charging straight into battle, racing to save Anne. His arc is purely reliant on that relationship, and his arc really focuses on that relational development piece. In the end, him and Anne obviously reconcile, but I feel like it would have been nice to have something early on about how he may struggle in relationships or with romance, even though he seems to write those things so well. But still, I don't think he was bad, just one of the weaker performances in terms of range and writing when met with all the other great performances of the cast. And he's just one of those characters that I feel didn't really have a super satisfying arc. The other characters which do not get a resolve are Jimmy and Englehorn. I would have loved to know what happened with them after they left the island, how the events of the movie changed them, even if it was just a throwaway line, like how Jimmy was dealing with the loss of Hayes, or Engelhorn would deal with the loss of so many of his sailors. I'm sure Denham could have made a comment about paying Engelhorn so much he could retire, or tried to pay Jimmy so much but he refused it. Just something to know where these characters went after. I also would have loved to see or know where Denham got the map, but again, that just speaks to the intrigue in the world Jackson created. You could spend a lot of time with each of the characters, following them both before and after the events of the movie, which this movie doesn't have the time to deal with because of its already gigantic runtime. But because of how large this film and this world are, there was, of course, additional resources and lore built for the film, but we'll circle back to that. But the way Jackson has brought these characters to life is effortless. After working on The Lord of the Rings, it's clear Jackson knew how to handle some of those fantastical elements, the adventure and the danger. As I mentioned earlier, back in the 90s, Jackson did have a completed draft of King Kong, but there were some stark differences than what we ended up getting with the final copy. For example, Jackson had originally seen Jack as a retired World War I pilot, and Anne and her father as archaeologists. They meet in the Sumatran Islands, discovering relics of the cult of the beast, a Kong statue, and the map to Skull Island. The rest of the movie flows pretty much the same, with the 3 Rex fights still being there and the stampede through the canyon. The script is shorter for sure, and the characters do feel more cartoonish, definitely not written with the same depth, and Denham being far more evil than what Black ended up giving, almost comedically so, and that may have been a result of it being written during the 90s. I'm happy with what we got, and that Jackson took it back to the drawing board, but one thing that does exist in both scripts is the passion to elevate Skull Island into a Jurassic Park from hell. What would an island which had been undisturbed for an additional several million years evolve into? He's able to balance the horror of the island, the action, the mystery, and even the romance so well. He's able to create and make Skull Island and New York feel like the same jungle, just one's green and one's concrete. And you can tell Jackson loves Kong. The story, the world he built, it is all so in-depth and all so incredible. He makes you feel for the big ape, and the connection he has with Anne is actually believable. That's due to the research Serkis and Jackson had done on gorillas, and that really did play dividends here. The only mixed take that I have here is that I know some people don't enjoy the oversized silverback gorilla design, but it never really bothered me. Some prefer him to be a little more bipedal, like the newest rendition and the new Godzilla movies, but honestly, I enjoy this design too. I'm indifferent. And circling back to the lore and the mythos created for the film, it didn't stop just here at the film. There was a book published titled The World of Kong that continued to explore the lore, which concludes with Skull Island having grown even more unstable, ends up sinking in the ocean. And another book, The Island of the Skull, a prequel which focuses on 3 separate stories. One of those stories focuses on a diver named Sam Kelly who ends up on the island. He's the one who actually creates the map and is picked up by a Norwegian barge. Now, there are some comparisons to the story Hayes and Lumpy tell Denham on the ship about a sole survivor. But given this novel is supposedly canon, he seemed dismissive of the idea of monsters and the story he's being told, despite in the book having heard a similar story. Nevertheless, it's an interesting read which does help fill in some details. Whether or not it's actually canon or makes perfect sense, I guess, is up for debate, but it just shows how much care and effort went into the world. To create Skull Island, Jackson worked with Weta Workshop, where, look at how good this looks. It still stands up today, and not a lot of movies can say that. I don't know what's happened with a lot of modern movies, but these effects are brilliant and groundbreaking, especially for being released in 2005. The set design, costume design, and special effects show just how good the right people can make these things. From the lush jungle to 1933 New York City, or that insect pit from hell, which I have to say is still as horrifying today as it was back then. Weta and Jackson have completely outdone themselves. And look at this art. It is so good. The world feels real. It's immersive. Every set piece is perfect. And don't forget the score from James Newton Howard. The daunting music on the island, or I'm on top of the world. It all fits so perfectly with the style that Jackson's going for. The cinematography, it's gorgeous. The slow motion and jarring shots used in the village during Kong's capture, it all adds a different layer of tension. The native village is cold, colorless, and dead, compared to the jungle's rich and vibrant colors. I mean, the production on this film is next level. The film flows and is paced very well, even from the island back to New York. But I can't help but wonder what happened during the voyage. Albeit the film's length is already exhausting, and I'm not sure it would add much to the story unless it explored Anne's resentment and disdain for the crew and for Jack. And something I always thought was odd was, during Jack and Anne's escape and return to the village, where were the natives? I guess they were probably all hiding because all the soldiers were there, but again, it just seemed odd that they all disappeared and were never seen or heard from again. Still, that shows you how engaging the film and the story are, and that you're left wanting more rather than it being an actual flaw or plot hole. King Kong is an incredible film, filled with depth, exciting lore, amazing creatures, and larger-than-life characters. Every aspect of this film is done extraordinarily well and continues Peter Jackson's fantasy genre domination. It's an action-adventure movie, a horror thriller, a romantic drama, and a tragedy all wrapped into one. The story of King Kong itself is iconic, and I have to say, Peter Jackson's King Kong may be in the conversation for the greatest remake of all time. And I have to give a shout out to the game as well. I played it on GameCube, and that is how you do a game based on a movie. Besides the name, Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official game of the movie, which is hilarious, it was an amazing game. If you haven't played it, you should at least look up some gameplay. I don't hand these out very often, but the impression King Kong made has stayed with me. When I revisit it, it does feel like the first time. I don't have many criticisms of the film, none that I think would drastically alter the final product in any way, or any real flaws that I can see. For me, King Kong is a solid 10 out of 10 movie. It's a glorious cinematic masterpiece, one far ahead of its time, that I feel isn't appreciated the way it should be. In my opinion, it is the most iconic and quintessential version of the character that still holds up to this day. Films of this caliber and of this complexity and that look this good just aren't made very often. If you haven't, definitely check this one out. And do yourself a favor and go for the extended edition, which includes some awesome scenes cut out of the theatrical. I promise it won't feel as long as it is. If you've seen this one, let me know your thoughts down below, and feel free to recommend some movies you'd be interested in seeing me review. If you're curious about how I rate movies, check out the description below for a breakdown. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And like always, I'm just being honest.